The sun hammered down on the Arizona territory like a blacksmith's anvil, merciless and unforgiving. Dust devils spun across the flatlands, and the horizon shimmered with heat that made the distant mesas look like they were melting into the sky. This was a land that killed the weak and tested the strong, and right now, it was testing a woman who refused to break. Her name was Keani, daughter of the Chiricahua Apache, and she was running with everything she had left. Her feet, wrapped in tattered deerskin moccasins, pounded the baked earth as she weaved between saguaro cacti and brittlebush. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage on her shoulder where a bullet had grazed her 2 days ago. Her black hair, once braided with care, now hung wild and tangled down her back, catching on mesquite thorns as she ran. Behind her, the sound she'd learned to dread. Hoofbeats. Distant but steady, like drums announcing her execution. 4 riders this time, maybe 5. She couldn't be sure anymore. The days had blurred together since the massacre at Cibecue Creek, since the cavalry had descended on her band during a peace gathering and turned celebration into slaughter. Keani had been gathering water when the first shots rang out. She'd watched from the treeline as soldiers set fire to wickiups, as they cut down elders and children without mercy. Her mother. Her 2 younger brothers. All gone in the smoke and screaming. She'd wanted to run back, to die with her people, but her grandmother's final words had stopped her. Live, child. Live and remember us. So she ran. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, she'd become a ghost, surviving on prickly pear fruit and what little water she could find in rocky seeps. She'd stolen a horse from a ranch, rode it until it collapsed, then continued on foot. The territorial government had placed a bounty on her head. $200 for the Apache woman who'd killed a rancher during her escape. Never mind that he'd tried to violate her when she'd begged for water. Never mind that she'd only defended herself. Dead or alive, the posters said, but men like the ones chasing her always preferred alive. They had uses for Apache women before they turned them in. Her lungs burned as she scrambled up a slope of loose shale. Each breath felt like inhaling fire. The sun was past its peak now, starting its slow descent toward evening, but the heat hadn't lessened. If anything, the rocks around her radiated stored warmth like oven stones. She needed to find cover before nightfall. In the open, they'd spot her campfire, and without a fire, the desert cold would drain what little strength she had left. A dry wash appeared ahead, carved deep into the earth by centuries of flash floods. Keani slid down into it, her hands scraping on sharp rocks. The wash was perhaps 6 feet deep, its walls striated with layers of red and tan stone. She pressed herself against the shadow side and tried to control her ragged breathing. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they might hear it from a mile away. The hoofbeats grew louder. Closer. She could hear voices now, rough and cruel. "Tracks fresh," one called out. "She came through here not 10 minutes ago." "Woman's got endurance, I'll give her that," another replied with a laugh that made Keani's skin crawl. 3 weeks and she's still running. Most would have laid down and died by now. "Apache don't quit easy," a third voice said. This one was different. Calmer. More dangerous. "That's why the army wants them gone. Can't tame what won't break." "Don't need to tame her," the first voice said. "Just need to collect that bounty. And maybe have a little fun first. Ain't nobody gonna care what condition she's in when we bring her to Fort Verde." Keani's hand moved to the knife at her waist. It was all she had left of her grandfather, a blade he'd made from Mexican steel and elk horn. The edge was still sharp. If they found her, she'd make sure at least one of them remembered her. The horses stopped directly above the wash. She could see their shadows on the opposite bank. Her fingers tightened on the knife handle. "Split up," the calm voice ordered. "Jenkins, you and Cutter head east. Follow the wash. Me and Wade will take the high ground. If she's hiding in the rocks, we'll spot her from above. Meet back at the burned sycamore by sundown. What if she rabbits? Then we run her down. She's on foot, half-starved, and wounded. She won't get far. The horses moved off in different directions. Kaini waited, counting her heartbeats. 100. 200. When she was certain they were gone, she began moving down the wash, staying low, stepping carefully to avoid loose stones that might clatter and give her away. The wash twisted and turned, eventually opening into a wider canyon. Ancient petroglyphs marked the walls, images of bighorn sheep and spiral symbols left by people who'd walked this land long before the Apache, long before the white men came with their guns and treaties that meant nothing. She was studying the canyon walls, looking for a way up, when the rifle shot cracked the air. The bullet struck the rock face inches from her head, spraying her with stone chips. Kaini dove behind a boulder as a second shot followed, then a third. Got her pinned, someone shouted. Wade, get around behind. She was trapped. 2 men in front, at least one circling to cut off her escape. The boulder she'd sheltered behind was large, but not large enough. They'd flank her within minutes, and then it would be over. Kaini closed her eyes for a moment, said a prayer to the mountain spirits, and prepared to sell her life dearly. Better to die fighting than to let these men take her alive. But then another sound cut through the canyon. A different rifle, deeper toned, and the shot wasn't aimed at her. It struck the ground between the 2 men in front, kicking up a fountain of dirt. That's your warning, a voice called out, strong and steady. Next one takes a kneecap. Your choice. Kaini risked a glance around the boulder. A lone rider sat atop a paint horse on the canyon rim, silhouetted against the blazing sky. He held a rifle across his saddle, and even from this distance, she could tell he knew how to use it. The angle was wrong for her to see his face, just his outline, broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat despite the heat. This ain't your business, stranger, one of the bounty hunters called back. We're working legal. That woman's wanted by the territorial government. Wanted for what? The stranger asked. Surviving? She killed a man. I heard about that. Heard he was trying to force himself on her when she cut him. Sounds like self-defense to me. The law says different. The law says a lot of things, the stranger replied. Don't make them right. Now, I'm gonna ask you boys once more, politely, mount up and ride out. This canyon ain't big enough for the kind of trouble you're inviting. The bounty hunter who'd been called Wade stepped forward, his hand resting on his pistol. You're making a mistake, friend. That's $200 walking around down there. We ain't leaving without her. The stranger's rifle shifted slightly. Then I guess you ain't leaving. For a long moment, nobody moved. The canyon held its breath. Then Wade's hand twitched toward his gun, and the stranger's rifle barked once. Wade went down screaming, clutching his leg. The bullet had shattered his knee exactly as promised. Anybody else want to test my word? The stranger asked calmly. The other bounty hunters looked at each other, then at their writhing companion, then back up at the lone rifleman. Whatever courage they'd had evaporated fast. They helped Wade onto his horse and rode out, the wounded man's curses echoing off the canyon walls until distance swallowed them. Silence returned. Kaini remained behind the boulder, knife ready, watching the rider. He hadn't moved, hadn't lowered his rifle. Smart. He didn't know if she'd run or fight. They're gone, he called down. You can come out. She didn't move. I'm not your enemy, ma'am. Name's Garrett Stone. I've got water and medical supplies if you need them. Still she waited. White men lied. It was what they did best. The rider seemed to understand. Slowly, he dismounted, removed his gun belt, and laid it on the ground along with his rifle. Then he stepped away from his weapons, hands visible, and sat down on a rock. I'll wait, he said simply. Take your time. Kaani watched him for a long while. The sun continued its descent, painting the canyon walls orange and red. The man called Garrett didn't move, didn't try to talk her out or make promises. He just sat there, patient as stone. Finally, her thirst overcame her caution. She emerged from behind the boulder, knife held ready, moving like a wounded cougar, slow, careful, ready to strike. Garrett didn't reach for his weapons. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and set it on the ground between them, then backed away again. It's fresh, he said. Filled it from a spring this morning. Kaani approached the canteen like it might be a trap. But when she uncorked it and smelled only clean water, something inside her broke. She drank deeply, too fast, water spilling down her chin. When she finally lowered the canteen, she was trembling. When'd you last eat? Garrett asked gently. 2 days, she admitted, her voice hoarse from disuse. Maybe 3. He nodded toward his saddlebags. Got jerky and hardtack. Not fancy, but it'll keep you upright. And I've got bandages for that shoulder. She looked down. The wound had soaked through her makeshift dressing, fresh blood darkening the fabric. Why? She asked, meeting his eyes for the first time. They were gray, like storm clouds, set in a weathered face that had seen maybe 35 hard years. Why help me? Garrett was quiet for a moment. I was at Sand Creek, he said finally. Colorado Territory, back in '64. I was young, stupid, followed orders I thought were righteous. We attacked a peaceful Cheyenne village. Killed women, children, old men. Mutilated the bodies. He looked away, jaw tight. I can't undo what I did that day. Can't bring those people back. But I can damn sure stop it from happening again when I have the chance. Kaani studied him. The shame in his voice sounded real. The weight he carried was visible in the set of his shoulders. One good deed doesn't wash away massacre, she said. No, ma'am, it doesn't. Nothing does. But I figure I owe a debt I'll never finish paying. This is just another installment. She considered this. Then, slowly, she nodded toward his weapons. You can pick those up. If you meant to harm me, you'd have done it already. Garrett retrieved his gun belt and rifle, moving slow and deliberate. There's a line shack about 5 miles north of here. Used to be a way station before the railroad went through. Nobody uses it anymore, but it's got walls and a roof. You could rest there, heal up proper. Those men will come back. Maybe. But not tonight. And tomorrow's worry for tomorrow. He swung back into his saddle, then offered his hand. You can ride if you want. Save your strength. Kaani hesitated, then sheathed her knife and accepted his hand. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength, and she settled onto the horse's back, her arms carefully not quite touching him, maintaining distance even as they shared the animal. They rode in silence as the sun finally touched the horizon, bleeding red across the desert sky. The line shack appeared as Garrett had described, a small wooden structure with gaps in the walls and a roof that sagged but held. It wasn't much, but after weeks in the open, it looked like a palace. Inside, Garrett built a small fire in the stone hearth while Kaani collapsed onto a dusty bunk. Her body had been running on will alone, and now that she'd stopped, every injury, every exhausted muscle made itself known. She hurt everywhere. Let me see that shoulder, Garrett said, bringing his medical supplies. She tensed, but he kept his distance, waiting for permission. Finally, she pulled aside her torn shirt, revealing the wound. The bullet had carved a furrow across the meat of her shoulder, not deep but infected, the edges angry and red. Garrett cleaned it with whiskey, his touch surprisingly gentle for such large hands. Kaani hissed but didn't pull away. When he finished bandaging it with clean cloth, he handed her the bottle. Might want some of that yourself. She took a long pull, the alcohol burning down her throat, warming her empty stomach. "Thank you," she said quietly. Garrett nodded. "I'll sleep outside. Keep watch. Those men might not come back tonight, but I'd rather be certain." "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted softly. "You've been hunted long enough. Tonight, you rest." He stepped out into the cooling evening, leaving her alone with the fire and her thoughts. Keani lay back on the bunk, staring at the ceiling beams. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt almost safe. It was a dangerous feeling, one she couldn't afford. Safety was an illusion in a world that wanted her dead. But as her eyes grew heavy and sleep finally claimed her, she let herself believe in the illusion, just for one night. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the walls, and for a confused moment, Keani thought she was back in her village, that the last few weeks had been a nightmare. Then the pain in her shoulder reminded her otherwise. Garrett was crouched by the fire, cooking breakfast on a flat stone. He looked up when she stirred. "Morning. How's the shoulder?" She tested it carefully. Still hurt, but the throbbing had lessened. "Better." "Good. Made enough for 2, if you're hungry." They ate in comfortable silence. The bacon was crispy, the coffee strong and bitter. Keani couldn't remember the last time food had tasted so good. "Where will you go?" Garrett asked finally. "North," she said. "Into the mountains. There are bands still free up there, hidden in places the cavalry won't follow. That's a long walk." "I'm used to walking." Garrett poured himself more coffee. "I've got a ranch about 40 miles west of here. Small operation, just me and a few horses. You could stay there while you heal up proper. Gather your strength before heading north." Keani shook her head. "Those men know your face now. They'll report you. The army will come. Let them come. I'm a citizen, I've got rights. They can't prove I did anything wrong. You shot a man. In defense of another person's life. That's legal, even in Arizona territory." He met her eyes. "Besides, I'm tired of running from what I did at Sand Creek. If the army wants to arrest me for finally doing the right thing, so be it. You'd risk everything for me? A stranger?" "You're not a stranger anymore," Garrett said simply. "And I told you, I owe a debt." Keani studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. 1 week. I'll stay 1 week to heal. Then I go north." "Fair enough." They rode double again, this time heading west across open rangeland. Garrett's ranch appeared in the afternoon heat, a modest adobe house, a barn with a corral, a windmill turning lazy circles in the breeze. A few horses grazed in a fenced pasture. It was simple, isolated, peaceful. "Not much," Garrett said as they dismounted. "But it's honest work." "It's more than most have," Keani replied. He showed her to a small guest room with a real bed, clean sheets, and a wash basin. "Take what time you need. I'll be working the horses if you need anything." That first day, Keani did little but sleep and eat. The bed was almost too soft after weeks on hard ground, but her body adapted quickly. Garrett kept his distance, respectful, never entering without knocking, leaving meals outside her door. By the second day, she ventured out. She found him in the corral, working with a young mare, speaking to the horse in low, soothing tones. He moved with the animal rather than against it, patient and calm. The mare, skittish at first, gradually settled under his gentle persistence. "You're good with them," Keani observed from the fence. Garrett glanced over. "Horses don't lie. They don't hate. They just want to understand. Makes them better company than most people I've known. My people say the same thing." He smiled slightly. "Guess wisdom's not limited by skin color." Too bad most folks haven't figured that out. Over the following days, a cautious routine developed. Garrett worked his ranch, and Keani helped where she could, mending tack, hauling water, grinding corn. Her shoulder healed quickly in the clean, dry air. The infection faded, and new skin began to close the wound. They talked in the evenings, sitting on the porch as the sun set. Garrett spoke of his youth in Missouri, his foolish decision to join the volunteer cavalry, the horrors he'd witnessed and committed. Keani spoke of her childhood, the old ways her grandmother had taught her, the seasonal migrations following game and wild plants. They were stories from different worlds, but the pain in them was the same. "How do you live with it?" she asked one night. "The guilt?" "I don't," Garrett admitted. "It lives with me. Every day. But I've learned that drowning in guilt doesn't help anybody. Better to wade through it and try to do something worthwhile with what's left of your life." Is that what this is? Atonement? Maybe. Or maybe I just finally met someone worth giving a damn about. The words hung in the air between them. Keani felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the summer heat. It was dangerous, this feeling. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got you killed. But when Garrett reached over and took her hand, she didn't pull away. The week passed too quickly. On the 7th day, Keani packed her meager possessions and prepared to leave. Garrett had given her supplies, food, a good knife, a warm blanket, everything she'd need for the journey north. They stood in the yard as the sun rose, his paint horse saddled and ready. "You don't have to go," Garrett said quietly. "Yes, I do. My people are in those mountains. What's left of them, anyway? They need every person who survives." "And what about what you need?" She looked at him, this broken white man who'd somehow become important to her. "I need to honor my dead. I need to fight for my people. That's who I am." Garrett nodded slowly. "I understand. But if you ever need a place, if you're ever running again and need shelter, you know where to find me." "Thank you," she said. Then, impulsively, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "You're a good man, Garrett Stone. Better than you know." She mounted the horse and rode north without looking back. If she looked back, she might stay, and staying would mean forgetting her duty, her people, her purpose. So she rode, the morning sun warming her back, Arizona stretching vast and empty ahead. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. She made it 3 days before the cavalry found her. Not the bounty hunters this time, but actual soldiers, a patrol out of Fort Verde, 20 men with orders to round up any remaining Apache and force them onto the reservation at San Carlos. They spotted her at midday, crossing a dry lake bed where there was no cover, no escape. She ran anyway, pushing the horse hard, but military mounts were fresh and well-fed. They overtook her within a mile. A sergeant grabbed her horse's bridle. "Easy now, girl. No point in more running. You're coming with us, peaceful or otherwise." "I've done nothing wrong," Keani said, though she knew it didn't matter. "You're Apache, ain't you? That's enough. President says all Apache go to San Carlos. You can walk, or we can drag you. Your choice." She chose to walk, preserving what dignity she could. They bound her wrists and tethered her to a soldier's saddle like an animal. The journey to Fort Verde took 2 days, every step a humiliation, every soldier's glance a reminder that she'd been reduced to cargo. The fort was exactly as she'd imagined, wooden walls, mounted cannon, the American flag snapping in the wind above it all. They locked her in a stone cell, 8 feet by 8 feet, with a single barred window too high to reach. Other Apache women were in neighboring cells, all captured, all awaiting transport to San Carlos. "They say we leave tomorrow," the woman in the next cell whispered through the wall. "A wagon train, heavily guarded. They're clearing the territory, taking everyone." Keani sat on the cold floor, her bound wrists bleeding where the ropes had chafed. She'd survived the massacre, survived 3 weeks in the desert, survived bounty hunters and starvation. And now it would end like this, not with a bullet or a blade, but with slow death on a reservation where her people would waste away from disease and despair. Unless. She examined the cell carefully. The door was solid oak, reinforced with iron. The window was too high and too narrow. But the floor was dirt, packed hard but still dirt. And she had time, one night, before the wagon train left. Using a loose stone from the wall, she began to dig. The work was agonizing. Her wounded shoulder screamed in protest. Her fingers bled. But she scraped and clawed at the earth beneath the wall, widening a gap inch by inch. The other women kept watch, calling out if a guard approached, covering the sound of her digging with coughing and singing. By midnight, she'd created a tunnel barely wide enough for her shoulders. She squeezed through, the earth pressing in on all sides, her lungs screaming for air. But she kept going, inching forward in absolute darkness, until suddenly the ground gave way and she tumbled out into open air. She was outside the walls, in the scrubland beyond the fort. Free. Kaani ran, staying low, moving fast. The alarm would sound soon, but she had a head start, and this time she knew where she was going. West. Back to Garrett's ranch. She pushed herself beyond exhaustion, running through the night, walking when she couldn't run, crawling when she couldn't walk. By dawn, she'd put 10 miles between herself and the fort. By noon, she could see the army patrol on her trail, horses gaining ground. She would never make it. Not on foot, not this tired. They'd catch her before sundown. But then, cresting a rise, she saw something that made her heart leap, a lone rider on a paint horse, coming fast from the west. Even at a distance, she knew the silhouette. Garrett. He reached her just as the patrol came into view. Without a word, he swept her up onto his horse and spurred it into a gallop, heading for a line of rocky hills. The soldiers shouted and gave chase, but Garrett knew this land, knew every canyon and hidden trail. How did you know? Kaani gasped, clinging to him. Heard about a patrol bringing in Apache prisoners. Had a feeling you'd be among them. He glanced back at the pursuing soldiers. Hang on tight. This is going to get rough. He guided the paint into a narrow canyon, then up a trail so steep and treacherous that the cavalry horses balked. The soldiers had to dismount and follow on foot, losing precious time. Garrett pushed higher, into country where only mountain sheep and desperate men ventured. By the time they reached the summit, the soldiers were distant specks below. Garrett didn't slow. He followed a ridge line north, then down into a hidden valley that had never appeared on any army map. There's a settlement here, he explained. Mix of Apache, Mexican, and white folks who want no part of the government's wars. They'll give us shelter. The settlement was exactly as he described, a collection of adobe homes and jacales built around a natural spring. The people who emerged to greet them were wary but not hostile. An old Apache man stepped forward, studying Kaani with sharp eyes. You are Chiricahua, he said. Not a question. I am, she confirmed. Your band? Gone. Massacred at Sibecue Creek. The old man nodded slowly. Many have been lost. But here, we survive. You are welcome, daughter, if you choose to stay. Kaani looked at Garrett, then at the settlement, then back at the rider who'd saved her twice now. Is there room for two? Garrett smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. They stayed. Garrett sold his ranch, quietly, to a Mexican family who wouldn't report his whereabouts. He brought his horses to the hidden valley and began building a new life, this time not alone. The seasons turned. Summer faded into autumn, autumn into winter. Kaani's shoulder healed completely, leaving only a scar she wore with pride. She taught Garrett the Apache language, and he taught her to read and write English. They built a small home on the edge of the settlement, neither fully part of the community nor separate from it. The army searched for them, of course. Patrols passed within miles of the valley, but somehow never found it. The old spirits protected this place, Kayani's grandmother would have said. Or maybe it was just that the land was too harsh, the mountains too unforgiving, for men who didn't belong there. One evening, as winter's first snow dusted the high peaks, Kayani and Garrett sat by their fire. She was sewing a shirt from deerskin, and he was carving a handle for a new axe. Comfortable silence filled the space between them, the easy quiet of two people who no longer needed words for everything. "I never thought I'd have this," Kayani said eventually. "Peace. Safety. A home." "Neither did I," Garrett replied. "Figured I'd die alone, probably drunk, probably deserving it." "You deserved better than that." "Maybe. But I damn sure didn't deserve you." She looked up from her sewing. "We don't get what we deserve, Garrett. We get what we fight for. What we refuse to let go of." He set down his carving and moved to sit beside her. "Then I'm glad I fought." "So am I." They sat close, shoulders touching, watching the fire dance. Outside, the wind sang through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. The world beyond the valley was still cruel, still broken, still hunting her people. But here, in this hidden place, with this scarred man who'd chosen redemption over comfort, Kayani had found something worth protecting. Not just survival. Not just safety. Home. But peace, as always in the West, was temporary. The trouble came with spring. A prospector, half-mad and dying of thirst, stumbled into the valley. The settlers gave him water, food, and sent him on his way with directions to the nearest town. They thought they'd shown mercy. They'd shown their location. The prospector talked. Drunk in a saloon, he boasted about the hidden Apache settlement, about the renegades living free in the mountains. Word reached Fort Verde within a week. The patrol that came this time was larger. 40 soldiers, led by a captain who'd built his reputation on Apache campaigns. They approached the valley at dawn, spreading out to cut off all escape routes. But the settlement had watchers, always watchers. The alarm went up while the soldiers were still an hour away. "We need to scatter," the old Apache man said, gathering the community. "Split into small groups, head into the high country. They can't follow us all." But Garrett shook his head. "If you run, they'll hunt each group down individually. You need time, a distraction." "What are you thinking?" Kayani asked, though she already knew. "I'm thinking someone needs to lead them away. Make them chase one target while everyone else escapes." He looked at the assembled settlers. "You've given us a home. Let me give you time." "You'll die," the old man said bluntly. "Maybe. But I've been on borrowed time since Sand Creek. If I die buying freedom for others, that's a better death than I've got any right to expect." Kayani grabbed his arm. "No. We run together, like we've always done. Together means they catch both of us. Separate means you live." He cupped her face gently. "I love you, Kayani. That means I need you alive more than I need you beside me." Tears stung her eyes. "Don't make me lose you." "Not now. You won't lose me. I'll lead them south, away from the valley. Once everyone's clear, I'll disappear into the desert. I know places even the army can't find." He kissed her forehead. "This isn't goodbye. It's just, I'll see you soon." Before she could argue further, he swung onto his paint horse and rode toward the valley entrance, shouting, drawing every soldier's attention. The captain barked orders, and the patrol wheeled to pursue him. Kayani watched him go, her heart tearing in two. Then the old man's hand touched her shoulder. "Come, daughter. We must go now, while his sacrifice means something. The settlers scattered into the mountains, taking different paths, carrying what they could. Kaani went north with a group of women and children, every step feeling wrong, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. They traveled for 3 days, deep into country where even the Apache rarely ventured. On the 4th day, they met another group of refugees from a different settlement, also running from the army's latest sweep. Together, they continued north, toward the border, toward whatever uncertain future awaited them. But Kaani couldn't settle. While the others built a new camp, she paced like a caged animal. Garrett had said he'd lead the soldiers south, then disappear. But what if he couldn't? What if they'd caught him? What if he was wounded, dying, alone? "You're going back," the old Apache man observed one evening. "I have to know. You might not like what you find." "I know. But not knowing is worse." He nodded slowly. "Then go with clear eyes, daughter. And if the spirits favor you, return with your man." She left that night, traveling light and fast, retracing her path south. It took 2 days to reach the valley. The settlement was abandoned now, homes standing empty, fires cold. The army had torn through it, searching, finding nothing. Kaani picked up Garrett's trail from there. He'd led them south as promised, through badlands and across dry rivers. The tracks told a story, one horse staying ahead of many, doubling back, using every trick to slow the pursuit. She followed for another day until the tracks led her to a canyon she recognized. It was where they'd first met, where he'd saved her from the bounty hunters. Had he come here on purpose? Was it a message? The trail ended at a rockslide. Recent, the stones still loose. And there, half buried in rubble, was Garrett's paint horse. Dead. Kaani's heart stopped. She scrambled down, searching frantically. If the horse was here, where was Garrett? Trapped under the rocks? Swept away by a flash flood? Then she saw it, boot prints leading away from the slide, limping but steady. He'd survived. The horse had gone down in the slide, but Garrett had walked away. She followed the tracks as the sun set, hope warring with dread. The prints led deeper into the canyon, to a hidden overhang she remembered. They'd sheltered there together once, during a thunderstorm, huddled close while rain pounded the desert. And there he was. Sitting against the rock wall, legs splinted with dead wood and strips of cloth, rifle across his lap, very much alive. He looked up as she approached, and a tired smile crossed his face. "Thought I told you to keep running north. Thought I told you not to die," she shot back. "Didn't. Though it was close. Horse broke its leg in the slide. I had to." He trailed off, the mercy killing written on his face. "Been here 2 days. Legs busted, but I've had worse." Kaani knelt beside him, examining the splint. The break was clean, the bandaging competent. "Can you ride?" "Not my horse. Yours, maybe, if you're offering." "I'm offering." She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "There's a new camp, 3 days north. More refugees. We can disappear there, start over. Again." "How many times we gonna start over?" he asked as they began the slow journey. "As many as it takes. That's what survivors do." They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest Garrett's leg. By the time they reached the refugee camp, infection had set in. Fever burned through him, and for 3 days, he drifted in and out of consciousness while Kaani and the camp's healer fought to save his life. On the 4th day, the fever broke. On the 5th day, he opened his eyes and asked for water. On the 6th day, he sat up and ate solid food. "You're too stubborn to die," Kaani told him, relief making her voice shake. "Learned from the best," he replied, reaching for her hand. The refugee camp grew slowly over the following months. More Apache arrived, displaced from their traditional lands, running from reservations where starvation and disease killed as surely as bullets. A few Mexicans joined them too, farmers fleeing debt, peonage and corrupt officials. Even a handful of whites appeared, deserters, outlaws, people with nowhere else to go. It wasn't a traditional Apache band, nor a Mexican village, nor a white settlement. It was something new, born of necessity and mutual survival. They built homes in the sheltered valley, planted crops in the good soil near the stream, hunted deer and elk in the surrounding forests. They made peace with the land and with each other. Garrett's leg healed crooked but functional. He walked with a limp now, especially on cold mornings, but he could ride and work and contribute. He taught some of the younger men to break horses gently, the way he'd learned. Keane taught Apache skills, tracking, finding water, reading the signs that warned of approaching storms or soldiers. They married that autumn, in a ceremony that blended traditions. An Apache elder blessed them in the old way, calling on the mountain spirits. A Mexican woman who'd once been a priest's housekeeper spoke Christian words over them. And Garrett's contribution was simple, a promise, spoken in both English and Apache, to stand beside Keane for whatever time they had left. In a world trying to kill us both, he said, choosing each other is the most rebellious thing we can do. They built a cabin at the edge of the settlement, larger than their first home. Large enough, Keane thought privately, for the family she hoped might come. But she didn't speak of it yet. Hope was dangerous in a world so uncertain. Winter came hard that year. Snow fell deep in the mountains, cutting them off from the outside world for months. It was a time of stories told around fires, of learning to live together when there was nowhere to escape to. Tensions flared sometimes, cultural differences, old grudges between Apache and Mexican, suspicion of the few whites. But the old Apache man who led the community was wise. He settled disputes with patience and reminded everyone that survival depended on unity. Out there, he said, gesturing toward the world beyond their valley, they see us as enemies. Apache, Mexican, white, doesn't matter. Anyone here is a renegade, a fugitive. We are each other's only allies. Garrett found his place in this new world. He wasn't trying to be Apache, wasn't trying to erase his past. He was simply trying to be useful, to earn his keep among people who had every reason to hate men who looked like him. And slowly, grudgingly, he was accepted. The children stopped hiding when he approached. The elders asked his advice on horse breeding. The hunters invited him on their expeditions. One evening in late winter, Keane told him her suspicion. They were lying in their cabin, the fire burning low, a storm howling outside. "I think I'm carrying your child," she said quietly. Garrett went very still. Then he rolled to face her, his eyes searching hers in the firelight. "You're certain?" "Not certain. But my body tells me things. And I haven't bled since the cold moon." He pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her belly. "A child. In this world. Is that blessing or curse?" "Both," she said honestly. "But when did we ever get only one or the other?" "Never," he admitted. "Nothing's ever simple for us, is it? Would you want it to be?" He thought about that. "No. Simple means soft. Soft gets you killed. Our child will be hard as iron and twice as sharp. Have to be, to survive." "Our child will be loved," Keane corrected. "That's what matters. The rest they'll learn." Spring came eventually, melting the snow, opening the trails. With it came news from the outside world. A Mexican trader who sometimes dealt with the settlement brought word, the Apache wars were intensifying. The army had captured Geronimo, the last great resistance leader, and was deporting his entire band to Florida. Reservations were being emptied, tribes scattered to distant lands. The territory was being cleared of its original inhabitants with mechanical efficiency. "They want the land," the trader explained. "Copper in the mountains, silver, grazing for cattle. Can't have that with Apache in the way. So they're erasing you. Not all of us, the old Apache man said quietly. Some of us know how to disappear. For how long? The trader asked. A year? 5? 10? Eventually, they'll map every canyon, settle every valley. Where will you go then? It was the question that haunted all of them. This hidden camp was a reprieve, not a solution. Eventually, the outside world would find them. And when it did, what then? Garrett thought about this often as Kayani's pregnancy progressed. By summer, her belly was round and obvious. By autumn, she was carrying so large that the healer predicted twins. The camp celebrated, children were rare now, precious, a sign that the people would continue. But Garrett worried. What future was he bringing a child into? A life of hiding, always looking over their shoulder, always one betrayal away from soldiers and bullets. Was that fair to an innocent soul? Stop thinking so loud, Kayani said one evening, catching his brooding expression. I can hear your thoughts from across the room. Just wondering if we're being selfish, he admitted. Bringing a baby into this. Life is always uncertain. Apache people have survived droughts, wars, disease, other tribes trying to kill us. We've survived because we keep living, keep having children, keep teaching them our ways. If we stop, then they've won without firing another shot. But. No buts, she interrupted firmly. This child is hope, Garrett. Hope that we're building something that will last. Hope that love can survive hate. Hope that your Sand Creek doesn't define you, that my massacre doesn't define me. We're more than our worst days. And this child proves it. He couldn't argue with that. So instead, he prepared. He built a cradle from pine wood, sanded smooth so no splinter would touch tender skin. He traded a rifle for soft cotton cloth and leather for making moccasins. He hunted extra game and dried the meat, stocking up for the weeks after birth when Kayani would need to rest. The baby came in early winter, just as the first snow fell. The birth was hard, longer than expected, and yes, there were twins, a boy and a girl, both tiny but fierce, wailing their arrival with impressive volume. Kayani held them, exhausted but radiant, one baby in each arm. Names? She asked Garrett. He looked at his children, these impossible miracles. The boy had his gray eyes. The girl had Kayani's black hair. Both had brown skin that marked them as mixed, belonging fully to neither world but carrying both within them. You should name them, he said. In your tradition. Our tradition now, she corrected. You're their father. You have a say. They debated for days, trying names from both cultures, seeking something that honored both heritages. Finally, Kayani suggested, what if we name them for qualities, not people? So they can define themselves? Like what? The boy, Neshoba. Wolf. For cunning and loyalty. And the girl? Kayani smiled. El Shani. She plays all the time. So she'll remember that life isn't just survival, it's also joy. Garrett tested the names, rolling them over his tongue. They felt right, felt true. Neshoba and El Shani Stone. Or should we use your family name? They're ours, Kayani said. Let them carry both our names. Neshoba and El Shani, children of Kayani and Garrett, Apache and White, Old World and New. They'll make their own path. The twins grew quickly, fed on mother's milk and the community's love. Everyone in the settlement doted on them, the first children born in the camp, a symbol of continuity. The old Apache man blessed them. The Mexican women knitted them blankets. Even the gruff white deserters carved them wooden toys. Garrett watched his children grow with wonder and terror. Every cough scared him. Every fever sent him to the healer in a panic. But Kayani remained calm. She'd grown up in a world without doctors, where children survived or didn't based on luck and the spirits' favor. She prayed to those spirits now, asking them to watch over her babies. The twins survived their first winter. Then their first summer. By their second winter, Neshoba was walking, and Elshani was trying to follow her brother everywhere. By 3 years old, both were fluent in Apache and learning Spanish and English. They were children of 3 worlds, belonging to all and none. Those were good years. The camp prospered. No soldiers found them. The hunts were successful. The crops grew. It felt almost like they'd escaped history, carved out a pocket of time where the outside world's rules didn't apply. But history always catches up. Neshoba was 5 years old when the prospectors came. A group of them, following rumors of silver in the mountains. They stumbled onto the camp by accident, expecting nothing, finding a thriving community. Most prospectors would have kept the secret for a price. But one of them was a former soldier, a man who'd fought Apache and still carried the hatred. He saw the brown faces, the wiki-ups alongside adobe homes, and he saw opportunity. He left in the night, heading for Fort Verde, carrying news that would bring soldiers faster than a thunderstorm. The camp scout spotted him 2 days later and brought word back. The old Apache man called a council immediately. "We have to move," he said without preamble. "All of us, now. He'll reach the fort in 4 days. The soldiers will come in 7. We have less than a week." Panic rippled through the community. Move where? They'd built homes here, planted crops, established patterns. This valley was defensible, had good water, supported their numbers. Where else could offer the same? North, someone suggested. Into Colorado. The armies spread thin there. East, another countered. Into New Mexico territory. Hide among the Mexican settlements. West, a third voice called. California. Los Angeles is big enough to disappear in. Arguments erupted. Families split over which direction to flee. Some wanted to stay and fight, die defending their home rather than run again. Others insisted that fleeing was the only way to survive, that principle was fine but bullets killed you just as dead. Garrett listened to it all, his mind racing. Finally, he stood. "We're asking the wrong question," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The question isn't where we go. It's how we buy time to get there." "What do you mean?" the old man asked. "I mean someone needs to slow the soldiers down when they come. Lead them on a false trail, make them think the camp went a different direction than it actually did. Buy everyone else 3, 4, maybe 5 extra days to get clear." "That's suicide," someone said. "Maybe. But necessary." Garrett looked around at the faces watching him, Apache, Mexican, white, children of mixed blood like his own. "I'm the logical choice. I'm white, I speak English. If they catch me, they won't kill me immediately like they would an Apache. They'll want to question me, find out where everyone went. That's hours, maybe days, of extra time." "Garrett, no," K&E said immediately. "It's the play that makes sense," he insisted. "You all head east, toward the Mexican settlements. I'll leave Sign heading west, toward California. Lead them on a chase through the desert until they figure out it's false. By then, you'll be scattered and safe." "And what happens to you when they realize you've tricked them?" the old man asked quietly. "Then I face whatever comes. But I'll have earned it, paying back that debt I mentioned." The council argued for hours, but ultimately, they knew Garrett was right. Someone had to be the decoy, and he was the best choice. The camp began preparations immediately, packing essentials, abandoning what they couldn't carry. It was like watching their world dismantle piece by piece. K&E refused to speak to Garrett that first day. She was furious, terrified, grief-stricken. He was choosing death, choosing to leave her a widow, choosing to make their children fatherless. But by the second day, as they packed their few possessions, her anger had burned out, leaving only sorrow. "I understand why," she said quietly as she folded the children's clothes. "Doesn't mean I have to like it. I know. You're being brave and stupid in equal measure." "Story of my life," he said with a sad smile. She stopped packing and looked at him. "If you die doing this, I'll never forgive you." "That's fair. But I'll tell our children you were a hero. That you saved dozens of people. That you chose love over safety. Also fair." He pulled her close. "Take care of them. Teach them everything. Make sure they know their father wasn't always a coward, that he finally did one truly good thing." "Just one?" she asked, touching his face. "You've done many good things, Garrett Stone. This is just the most dramatic." They made love that night, desperate and tender, memorizing each other's bodies like they were sacred texts. And maybe they were, the scripture of two broken people who'd found something whole in each other. Dawn came too soon. The camp scattered at first light, families heading in different directions with plans to reunite at a meeting point 3 weeks hence. Kane left with the twins and a small group heading southeast. Neshoba waved goodbye to his father, not understanding. Ailshani cried, sensing the sadness even if she didn't know its source. Garrett watched them go until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he mounted his horse, now an old gelding that had replaced the paint, and headed west, leaving obvious tracks, camping where soldiers would find his fires, making himself a trail they couldn't miss. The soldiers found the empty camp 3 days later. 40 men, led by a new captain hungry for glory. They searched the settlement, found it abandoned, and began looking for tracks. Garrett had made sure his trail was the most obvious, the freshest, the easiest to follow. They took the bait. He led them west for 2 days, then south, then west again, zigzagging across the desert, always staying just ahead. At night, he built fires that would be visible for miles. During the day, he left signs, horse droppings, disturbed brush, even a dropped bandana at one point. The soldiers followed eagerly, certain they were closing in on the renegade camp. On the 4th day, Garrett led them into the Badlands, a maze of canyons and dead ends where water was scarce and navigation treacherous. He'd been through here once before, years ago, and he remembered the tricks, which paths led to dead ends, where springs hid, how to navigate by landmarks invisible to outsiders. The soldiers struggled. 2 horses went lame. 3 men succumbed to heat exhaustion. Still they pursued, driven by the captain's obsession with catching the Apache sympathizers. On the 6th day, Garrett's horse finally gave out. The old gelding had been ridden too hard for too long. It collapsed in a dry wash, foam flecking its mouth, and didn't rise again. Garrett put it down quickly, mercifully, and continued on foot. The soldiers caught up to him that evening. He was sitting by a small fire, drinking the last of his water, when they surrounded him. 20 men, rifles pointed, faces sunburned and furious. The captain dismounted. "Where are they?" "Who?" Garrett asked mildly. "The Apache. The Mexicans. The whole damn camp we've been chasing." "No idea what you're talking about, Captain. I'm just a prospector who got lost." The captain's face went red. "We've been following your trail for a week." "Have you now?" Garrett smiled. "Then I'd say you wasted a week." The captain hit him, a backhanded blow that split Garrett's lip. "You're harboring fugitives. That's a federal crime. You'll hang for it." "Maybe. But I've bought them over a week to scatter. You'll never find them now. Too many directions, too much country, too few soldiers." Garrett spat blood. "So yeah, hang me. I've earned it. And I'll go to the gallows knowing I finally balanced the scales a little bit." The captain hit him again, harder. "Where's the main group headed?" Hell if I know. We all split up. You're lying. Prove it. They beat him that night, trying to break him, force him to reveal the camp's destination. But Garrett had endured worse at Sand Creek, had lived with guilt worse than any physical pain. He told them nothing, just smiled through broken teeth and asked if they hit women and children this hard too. By morning, the captain realized he'd gained nothing. Garrett was transferred to Fort Verde in chains, charged with harboring fugitives and aiding hostile Indians. The trial took a week, the verdict predetermined. Guilty on all counts. Sentence, death by hanging. They gave him a week before the execution, enough time to send word to any family who might want to say goodbye. Garrett had no family, no one but Keani and the children, and he certainly wasn't going to tell the army where they were. So he sat in his cell, accepting his fate, hoping that somewhere out there, his family was safe. But Keani wasn't safe. She was planning a rescue. The group she'd fled with had reached the Mexican settlements and made contact with the refugee network, a loose connection of people who helped Apache fugitives disappear. When word reached them that Garrett Stone was awaiting execution at Fort Verde, Keani didn't hesitate. "I'm going to get him," she announced. "That's suicide," one of the refugees said. "The fort is heavily guarded." "I don't care." "Think of your children," another urged. "They've already lost their father. Don't make them orphans. They haven't lost him yet. And I didn't survive this long by accepting what men tell me is impossible." The old Apache man, who'd traveled with their group, studied her quietly. "What do you need?" "Distraction," she said. "Something to draw the guard's attention while I get him out." "I might have an idea," he said slowly. 3 days before the scheduled execution, a fire broke out in Fort Verde's supply warehouse. It started small, a lantern knocked over by accident, or so it appeared. By the time the guards realized it was serious, flames were consuming months of stored grain, ammunition, and equipment. Every available soldier rushed to fight the blaze. The fort descended into controlled chaos, officers shouting orders, men forming bucket brigades, horses panicking in the corral. In the confusion, a small figure in an oversized coat and hat slipped through the shadows. Keani moved like smoke, invisible, heading for the stockade where prisoners were held. The guard who should have been watching the cells was helping with the fire. She picked the lock with a bone tool, the same technique she'd used to escape this very fort months earlier. Garrett looked up as his cell door opened. His face was a mask of bruises, one eye swollen shut, but his good eye widened when he recognized her. "You're insane," he whispered. "Frequently." "Can you walk?" "Barely." "Then lean on me. We're leaving." They moved through the fort, staying low, using the smoke and confusion as cover. Keani had studied the layout carefully, the weak point in the eastern wall, the blind spot where shadows gathered thickest. They reached it just as the warehouse collapsed, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Outside the walls, 2 horses waited, held by one of the Mexican refugees. Keani helped Garrett mount, then swung up behind him. They rode hard into the darkness, heading southeast, back toward the network of safe houses and hidden trails. Behind them, the fire burned for hours. By the time anyone noticed the prisoner was gone, they had a 12-hour lead. The pursuit was half-hearted. The fort commander was more concerned with the destroyed supplies and the suspicion that the fire had been deliberately set. One prisoner, a condemned man who would have died anyway, wasn't worth depleting his remaining resources. Keani and Garrett rode for 3 days, switching horses twice, following guides who knew every hidden spring and secret canyon. They finally reached a small settlement of Apache families who'd crossed into Mexico, beyond American jurisdiction. The twins ran to greet them, and Garrett collapsed from his horse into their arms, crying despite himself. His children. His wife. His family. Against all odds, they were together again. Recovery was slow. Garrett's ribs were cracked, his face would carry permanent scars, and nightmares plagued his sleep. But K&E was patient, and the settlement was safe. They had crossed an invisible line, and on this side, the American army had no power. The settlement nestled in a valley surrounded by protective mountains. A clear stream ran through its center, lined with cottonwood trees. Adobe homes dotted the landscape, interspersed with traditional Apache wickiups. It was a place of mixed traditions, where different peoples had come together out of necessity and built something new. Garrett's injuries took months to fully heal. His ribs mended slowly, aching in cold weather. The scars on his face remained, a permanent reminder of his time in the Fort Verde cell. But worse than the physical wounds were the nightmares. He'd wake gasping, thinking he was back in that cell, hearing the creak of the gallows being constructed outside his window. K&E would hold him on those nights, speaking softly in Apache, reminding him where he was. Safe. Home. With family. The past doesn't let go easily, she told him one night after a particularly bad dream. I still see my village burning. Still hear my mother's screams. The memories never leave, but they become quieter over time. Manageable. How long did it take for you? I'll let you know when it happens, she said with a sad smile. As Garrett healed, he began to integrate into the settlement's daily life. The old Apache man, whose name was Dahana, taught him more of the language and customs. Garrett practiced with the children, stumbling over pronunciations, making them laugh with his clumsy attempts. But he persisted, determined to understand his wife's culture more deeply. He also taught what he knew. Several young men in the settlement were interested in horsemanship, and Garrett spent hours with them in the corral, showing them how to gentle wild horses, how to read an animal's body language, how to build trust instead of breaking spirit. Horses are like people, he'd explain. You can force them to obey, but they'll never truly be yours. Earn their respect, though, and they'll carry you through hell itself. One of his students, a young Apache man named Kale, proved particularly talented. You have the gift, Garrett told him after watching Kale calm a skittish mare with just his presence and voice. Don't waste it. The twins thrived in the settlement. Neshoba, now 6 years old, followed his father everywhere, absorbing everything Garrett taught about horses and survival. The boy had his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination, a combination that made him fearless sometimes to the point of recklessness. He reminds me of you, K&E said one evening, watching Neshoba attempt to climb a cottonwood tree that was clearly too tall for him. That's not a compliment, Garrett replied, moving to spot the boy in case he fell. It is and it isn't. He'll do great things or die trying. Either way, he'll never be ordinary. Ailshani was different, quieter, more thoughtful. She spent her days with the elder women, learning to weave baskets, grind corn, prepare traditional foods. But she also learned reading and writing from a former schoolteacher in the settlement, a white woman who'd fled an abusive husband and found refuge among the Apache. She'll be a bridge, K&E observed. Between the old world and the new. Between our people and theirs. Is that good or bad? Both. Bridges let people cross, but they also bear the weight of everyone walking on them. It's a hard path. As the months turned into years, the settlement grew. More refugees arrived, Apache from other bands, Mexicans fleeing poverty or persecution, even a few whites running from the law or troubled pasts. The community adapted, creating new traditions that blended multiple cultures. They celebrated both Apache ceremonies and Mexican festivals. They spoke 3 languages interchangeably. They wore a mix of clothing styles, Apache moccasins with Mexican serapes, cowboy hats with traditional jewelry. It was chaotic sometimes, but it worked. Garrett and Kayani's home became a gathering place for the settlement. Their adobe house, expanded over the years, had a large main room where people would gather to share meals, tell stories, settle disputes. Kayani's wisdom as a survivor and Garrett's experience as an outsider who'd earned acceptance made them natural mediators. One evening, a dispute arose between two families, one Apache, one Mexican. The Apache family claimed the Mexican family's goats had destroyed their corn crop. The Mexican family insisted the Apache family hadn't fenced their field properly. Voices were raised, old prejudices surfaced, threats were made. Dahana brought both families to Garrett and Kayani's home. "Settle this," he said simply, "before it tears the community apart." Garrett and Kayani listened to both sides, asked questions, examined the evidence. Then they rendered their decision: the Mexican family would replace half the destroyed corn, and the Apache family would help build a better fence. Both families would work together on the project, forced to cooperate. "You're punishing both of us," the Apache patriarch complained. "Yes," Kayani said firmly. "Because you're both right and both wrong. And more importantly, because you need each other. There are too few of us to afford divisions. Out there, the world wants us all dead or broken. In here, we survive together or not at all." The families grumbled but complied. By the time they'd finished building the fence together, they'd become friends, united by shared labor and common purpose. Years passed in this rhythm. Small dramas, solved. Conflicts, mediated. Children, born and raised. The settlement slowly transformed from a desperate refuge into a real community, a place where people didn't just survive but actually lived. Neshoba grew into a skilled hunter and horse trainer. By 15, he could track deer through the mountains and gentle wild horses in days instead of weeks. He also had his father's sense of justice, often defending younger children from bullies or standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. Ailshani became the settlement's teacher and historian. She collected stories from the elders, writing them down in 3 languages so they wouldn't be forgotten. She taught reading to the children, believing that education was the key to survival in a changing world. "The old ways are important," she told her mother. "But the new ways will keep us alive. We need both." When Neshoba turned 18, he announced his intention to take a wife, a young Apache woman named Alona who'd arrived in the settlement as a child. Garrett and Kayani gave their blessing, and the wedding was celebrated with joy. It was one of the first marriages between people who'd grown up entirely in the settlement, a sign that they were building something lasting. Ailshani married a year later, choosing a Mexican man named Miguel who worked as a blacksmith. Their wedding blended traditions even more thoroughly, with Apache songs and Mexican dancing and Garrett awkwardly attempting both. "You look ridiculous," Kayani told him as he tried to follow the steps of a traditional Mexican dance. "I feel ridiculous," he admitted. "But she's my daughter. I'll dance however she wants." The grandchildren came next. Neshoba and Alona had 3 children in quick succession. Ailshani and Miguel had 2. Garrett and Kayani's home filled with the sound of young voices, the chaos of family gatherings, the joy of watching new life take root. But peace, as always, was temporary. When Neshoba's eldest son was 5 years old, riders appeared at the settlement. Not soldiers this time, but something potentially worse: bounty hunters, searching for an Apache man who'd escaped from a reservation and was rumored to be hiding in Mexico. The hunters rode through the settlement, examining faces, asking questions. They were polite but firm, armed but not overtly threatening. They had a job to do, and they intended to do it. Dahana met with them, Garrett at his side for translation and moral support. "We're looking for an Apache named Josiah," the lead hunter explained. "Goes by the name Nate. He's wanted for killing a reservation agent. There's a $500 reward." "We don't harbor murderers," Dahana said calmly. "Didn't say you did. But we heard this settlement is where Apache come to hide. Figured we'd check." "You've checked. You're welcome to leave now." The hunter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, we will. But first, we're going to have a look around." Make sure this Josiah isn't here. Wouldn't want to ride away from $500. This is Mexican territory, Garrett interjected. You have no authority here. Don't need authority. Just need to collect a bounty. Mexican government doesn't care what happens to Apache any more than the American government does. The hunters spent 2 days in the settlement, searching, questioning, making everyone nervous. They didn't find Josiah, because he wasn't there, but they found something else, evidence of the settlement itself, its location, its population. When they finally left, Dahana called a council meeting. They'll tell others, he said grimly. About this place. About how many of us are here. How vulnerable we are. The Mexican authorities might decide we're a problem. More bounty hunters might come. We need to prepare for the possibility that we'll have to move again. Or we could defend ourselves, Neshoba suggested. He was 23 now, strong and confident, untouched by the defeats that had broken the previous generation. We have 40 men who can fight. We know this land. We could hold off raiders. Fighting isn't always the answer, Garrett said quietly. Sometimes survival means knowing when to stand and when to run. Is that what you did? Neshoba challenged. Run? When I needed to, yes. And fought when fighting mattered. The trick is knowing which is which. The debate continued, but no decision was made. The settlement remained on alert, posting more guards, preparing emergency plans. But weeks passed, and no one came. Months passed. A year. Maybe the bounty hunters had kept the secret after all. Maybe they'd been killed before they could report. Or maybe the authorities simply didn't care enough to act. Whatever the reason, the settlement remained undisturbed. But the scare had changed things. The sense of permanent safety had been shattered. People started teaching their children how to scatter and hide at a moment's notice. Families kept emergency packs prepared. The settlement had always been temporary, now everyone felt that temporariness in their bones. Garrett was 58 years old when his heart first betrayed him. It started with chest pain, a tightness that made breathing difficult. The settlement's healer, an old Apache woman named Nadina, examined him and delivered the verdict: his heart was wearing out. How long? Garrett asked. Could be years. Could be months. The heart is mysterious. It stops when it stops. Keani refused to accept this. She tried every remedy Nadina suggested: herbs, rest, dietary changes. She prayed to the mountain spirits, made offerings, begged for more time. Garrett humored her, knowing it was as much for her peace of mind as his health. I'm not afraid of dying, he told her one evening. I've had more years than I deserved. More happiness than I ever imagined. Don't you dare, she said fiercely. Don't you dare make peace with leaving me. Keani. No. We've survived too much for you to just give up now. You fight. You hear me? You fight for every day. So he fought. He cut back on heavy work, focused on teaching rather than doing. He spent more time with his grandchildren, passing on everything he knew. He wrote down his memories, working with Ailshani to create a record of his life: Sand Creek, his guilt, his redemption, his love for an Apache woman who'd saved him as much as he'd saved her. He had 3 more years. 3 good years of watching his grandchildren grow, of sitting with Keani on warm evenings, of feeling useful and loved. His heart would give him warnings, sharp pains, moments of breathlessness, nights when his pulse raced for no reason. But it kept beating, stubborn as the man it kept alive. He died on a summer morning, peacefully, with Keani beside him. His last words were in Apache, a language he'd learned out of love: Shinoi a hihi. Thank you, my wife. The settlement mourned him deeply. They'd lost a teacher, a friend, a bridge between cultures. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley, marking his grave with a simple stone and his rifle, barrel down, the way cavalry soldiers were sometimes honored. Kaani sat by his grave for 3 days, as was Apache custom. She spoke to him, told him stories, reminded him of their life together. On the 3rd day, she stood, kissed the stone, and walked back to the settlement. She had grandchildren to raise, a community to serve, stories to preserve. Grief was real, but so was life, and life demanded attention. She lived another 7 years, growing old with grace and strength. Her black hair turned fully white. Her face became a map of wrinkles, each line a story. But her mind remained sharp, her spirit unbroken. She became the settlement's eldest elder, the keeper of memories, the voice of wisdom. When she sensed her time coming, she gathered her children and grandchildren around her. "I want you to remember something," she said. "Your grandfather and I, we came from different worlds. We should have been enemies. But we chose love instead. We chose to see each other's humanity. That choice, that simple choice to see the person instead of the enemy, that's what saved us both." She looked at each of them in turn. "The world will always try to divide you. To make you hate. To convince you that people who look different or speak different or believe different are your enemies. Don't let it. Choose love. Choose understanding. Choose to build bridges instead of walls." She died that night, quietly, surrounded by family. They buried her next to Garrett, reuniting them in death as they'd been in life. The years continued to turn. The settlement endured through droughts and raids and the slow encroachment of modernization. Some of the younger generation eventually left, drawn to cities and opportunities. Others stayed, maintaining the community their grandparents had built. Neshoba became the settlement's leader after Dahana passed. He governed with his father's sense of justice and his mother's fierce protection of the vulnerable. Under his leadership, the settlement thrived, even establishing trade relationships with nearby Mexican towns. El Shani continued teaching and writing, eventually compiling a comprehensive history of the settlement and the Apache diaspora. Her book, written in 3 languages, became an important document, preserving stories that might otherwise have been lost. When Neshoba was an old man himself, silver-haired and weathered, he would sit on the same hill where his parents were buried and tell his own grandchildren about Garrett and Kaani. They were just 2 people, he'd say. Broken by the world, running from the past, trying to survive. But they found each other, and that made all the difference. They built this place, this community where different people can live together. Never forget that. Never forget that love can triumph over hate if you're brave enough to choose it. The settlement still exists today, though much changed. It's no longer hidden or desperate. It's a thriving community, officially recognized by the Mexican government, home to hundreds of people from diverse backgrounds. There are paved roads now, electricity, internet. The modern world has arrived. But on that hill overlooking the valley, 2 graves remain. Simple stones marked with 2 names, Garrett Stone and Kaani Stone. People still visit them, leaving flowers, saying prayers, remembering the story. Because some stories are too important to forget. Stories of survival, of love, of choosing humanity over hate. Stories that remind us that even in the darkest times, even when the world seems determined to crush us, we can find light. We can find each other. We can build something beautiful from the ruins of everything we've lost. Garrett and Kaani's story is one of those stories. It's a story of the West, but not the West of gunfighters and outlaws. It's the West of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Of love born from mutual recognition of suffering. Of families built across cultural divides. Of communities created in desperation but sustained by hope. Their blood runs through generations now, mixed and blended, carrying both Apache and white heritage. Their descendants live scattered across 2 countries, in cities and rural areas, carrying their legacy forward in 1,000 different ways. And when those descendants tell stories of their ancestors, they speak of courage and love. Of a cowboy haunted by his past who found redemption in protecting instead of destroying. Of an Apache woman who refused to surrender even when the world demanded it. Of two people who should have been strangers, should have been enemies, but chose to be partners instead. In the end, that's all any of us can do: choose love over hate, understanding over fear, building over destroying. Garrett and Keani made that choice every day of their lives together. And because they did, their story continues, passed down through generations, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest chapters, light can still break through.